Welcome to Hashtag with Nabuguzi Kiwanuka. This is a place where we help you unravel social constructs, discuss self-development in line with mental health, emotional well-being, and everything in between that directly or indirectly affects us in the millennial world around us. If you're hearing my voice for the first time and are the kind of person who is not scared of being a better version of yourself even if it requires you to contradict who you were 24 hours ago, consider this your virtual home. I'm your host, Nabuguzi Kiwanuka, and I cannot wait to engage with you in the various conversations. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 88 of Hashtag with Nabuguzi Kiwanuka. In this conversation, we are going all the way to Nigeria. Calm down, or come back. We are already there in Nigeria. As long as you have tuned in into this episode, you are going to be in Nigeria, and we are going to be hearing from Esther Timothy and Udeme Okono. These two are mental health practitioners in Nigeria, and in this conversation, we talk about the mental health law status in Nigeria, individual views on mental health, stigma, therapy, and everything in between that affects them in their line of work. So I have a disclaimer. The sound quality is not the one that I'm really proud of, and that's really on me. Doing first time things sometimes can really mess up stuff, and this is how I messed up the audio quality. I did not forget. I didn't know that my device was supposed to be set to peak the voices from the microphone. So we recorded for close to an hour, and the moment we were done, y'all, I played the recording and it had no volume. Nothing. Zero. But I was very lucky, or we were very lucky, that Esther Timothy had recorded something on her end, and that's what I've been working with to produce the final product. So all throughout the conversation, not all throughout, the main bits of the conversation, Esther Timothy is loud and clear. You don't really have to hear my voice, you hear it all the time, for those that have always been here. But for those that are new, you are hearing my voice right now. So then Udeme Okono's voice. If you're patient enough, I'm asking you to be patient. If you're patient enough, you're going to hear him loud and clear towards the very end. If anything resonates with you during our conversation, do not hesitate to share with us on social media with the hashtag HTNKInstation. Here's our episode.
Related courses in the social sciences were not really looking to practice. They just wanted to get basic university degrees and just get off. And so by the time I was done, I actually don't like to go with what every other person is doing. I like to walk my own path. I like to clear the path for other people to also walk along. So by the time I was done with my bachelor's and started my master's degree, I had decided because I also had an experience. I think that an encounter I also had while doing my compulsory national service shaped me. A federal prison facility, now we call it correctional facility, correctional centers. And I met certain people who were going through so much, but the support that they were having there in that facility, I think we had just one psychologist who was an officer, and I was the next. And so we discovered that the service had taken the greater part of the psychologist, the uniform aspect of his life, the regimentation, the routine, shining parades, and the rest of the stuff that they had to do that required force, and the rest of it took away the other part, which would have to do with giving rehabilitational support to these people. And so I discovered that I needed to buckle up and get into it. And so those are a few pointers that drove me into the area of mental health.
It's quite an interesting one, where you just choose to walk your own path and take on where people are dodging. Esther, how did you take into mental health?
Okay, to me, I think after my BSc in psychology, I went for NYC, came back, and just like any other normal fresh graduates, I was looking for a job, and I was ready to do anything that would be offered to me. But then, fortunately enough, I was employed in a non-governmental organization to volunteer as a mental health focal person. So in school, I would say I didn't do much practical of mental health and like maybe how to administer mental health services to people people in the real world, because then it was mostly academic. But then venturing into the NGO and with the population I'm working with, which include people that ingest psychoactive substance, I tend to notice that people have a lot of mental health issues and they don't even know. And then even being deployed to a place that nobody actually heard of mental health or what it means to them, and I have to start with step down training them on what mental health is, and then throwing a casual question to someone like, what is mental health? And they're telling you that it has to do with someone that is deranged, someone that's on the street, someone that's mad. So that was where the whole motivation comes in, because it's a whole lot of misconception. The reason why people neglect the mental health and they don't even seek for therapy, and they think therapy is only for the mentally ill people. So I took up interest there. So I decided not to stay confined to the organization job role, but to go out to really practice to the outside world, because the population my organization is working with is quite limited. It doesn't reach the general population. So that's where I took up the interest, and also learning that majority of my colleagues that graduated with me, they don't really want to do anything about mental health, maybe because the system is not even encouraging us. I just decided that I have to be a voice, I have to use my voice, and I have to do everything I can. That's where the passion came from.
It's powerful what you say when you talk about the system not being supportive, because when I was doing some research before the conversation or the recording, or even coming to as far as inviting you to come on board, I had to research about the existence of the law and what it really talks about regarding to psychology or mental health in Nigeria. And I noticed that you people have an act that is, I don't know how old, I don't remember, and it's called the Lunacy Act. But this is as far as, I think, before your independence. Correct me. How many years is that?
Nigeria is 62, and that law or that act has been in force way before we had our independence.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's called the Lunacy Ordinance?
Lunacy Law.
Lunacy Law.
Yeah.
Where do you stand as practitioners when you come to a place of helping or servicing the people in need of mental health, and you're having these laws, archaic laws, I would say, in place? And I mean, when you talk about it as a lunacy law, and Esther talking about how people have this perception about mental health, that when you hear mental health, people are understanding that it is a mad person. And then the law in force is also calling it the Lunacy Act. Where do you stand as practitioners?
It's actually a tough call for us. Putting a figure, the Lunacy Act was last amended or just renamed in 1958. That was just 2 years to our independence. And since then, so much has changed. But unfortunately, I think an attempt was made at passing a new bill in 2003, which actually did not succeed, and a few other attempts. Now, it's difficult for us practitioners because the existence of this law, for instance, gets in the way of our practice in so many ways. For instance, attempted suicide is still a crime in Nigeria. And so victims or people who attempt suicide who are aware of this Lunacy Act must ensure that they succeed at it or risk jail time. What's the difference? We're trying to solve a problem, and then you see how someone who was rescued from actually dying by suicide is being paraded and taken to custody because there is a law that empowers them to do this. Now, probably back then, this was going to serve as a deterrent for people who were going to attempt. But in this age, it passes a different message at time. And so people become more secretive about their mental health, how they feel about their plans. Because in time past, you could see hints. You could get to, there's a possibility. So now it gets even more difficult spotting the red flags. And so, again, as a professional, I think we all needed to, for me, for instance, I am into suicide awareness, prevention, rescue, and rehabilitation. One of the things that I discovered was that we needed to find a way around this situation since we could not solve it by an act of parliament yet. And so we held an exhibition of arts in my state, and one of the things I did was that we invited myself alongside my best friend, who is a sculptor. We invited key stakeholders in different fields. For instance, we invited the Commissioner of Police, we invited the Controller of Prisons, now Corrections. we had people from the law practice, and we had people from the mental health advocacy front. And so we brought them to sit down and listen to people who had challenges, because it was more of a group therapy session also. So they sat and they heard firsthand how these issues were happening. And so what this did for us was that we were able to build relationships, all right? We were able to build alliances. They got to understand how deep issues of mental health had become and why we needed to give way to certain things to slide. For instance, one of those times we had information of someone who was attempting suicide, and we went all out. This was around 12 a.m. I think there was still curfew in the city at the time, post-COVID-19. There was still curfew from a certain time to a certain time. And I needed to go out with my team to find this person. And so what did I do? I reached out to my contact with the police, who was sent as a representative of the Commissioner of Police at that event. And I told him, see, this is the situation we have at hand. And he said, do you need backup? This is because we had a relationship. And they deployed the backup. When they deployed the backup, I said, by the time they get to the scene, I just want them to give us the needed backup, to give us the needed support, not for them to come and enforce the arrest and detention of an attempted suicide. Now he could understand, and he passed the message the same way to his subordinates. And that helped the process. Now, if we had not made this effort, if we had not built these relationships, two things were already standing against us. There was curfew. And for you to step out against curfew, I was going to have to deal with so much of restriction from security. And then two, even calling security was going to be a problem for this victim. Now he is rescued, and then it turns out that people who handed him over to the police. You see, would have had to hamper our practice. We would have had a lot to deal with us. It would rub off on the trust. It would rub off on the confidence that the people had in our practice. And so I think that one of the things that we had to navigate it a different way, while we are hoping that an act of parliament is brought to the fore to see how to address this in a more holistic way. This is just a short-term solution to a long-term problem. So that's what we were able to do.
It's interesting. You're going as far as risking, I would say, because if you're looking at curfew hours, but then it's important, like you say, it's valuable when you create relationship with the stakeholders and the people who are in charge. I think that's why you got the help. Esther, is there a way the ordinance or the act that is enforced makes it hard for you to reach out to the people that you serve?
Okay, my experience with the NGO, I won't really say there are really ordinances against my practice, because I've not really gone deep into the government sector. But then the NGO implementing a mental health program, something that has never really been done, I think it's actually a way of creating that awareness even to the leaders who make this law. Because if we look at the lunacy law, just like Udeme mentioned, the context actually violates fundamental human rights of persons with mental health and psychosocial disabilities. So they seem to tag every sign of mental health symptom as madness and insanity, and thereby a law forcing people to be chained and maltreated by even practitioners. So with the implementation of mental health in the program I'm currently doing, we have a way of making people to understand that mental health is not the same as mental illness, and mental illness is just a symptom and not the person. Therefore, these people should be treated as human as they are. So my experience too with correctional center, because I go there to provide services to inmates, and majority of them are suicidal, but they don't really care. Like, they don't care about them at all, and then forcing them to do a lot of things. And even when some of their actions are because of their mental states, and nobody seems to understand that. But we carry out advocacy in correctional centers, where we sensitize the people on what mental health is and the differentiation and how they should not criminalize these people's behavior, because there are people that need help, because mental health is equivalent to physical health, and if a person is not mentally sound, they can't take care of their physical health. So most of their actions might be as a result of the symptom they have, which should be managed, and they should be treated with care instead of maltreating them. So to me, I think carrying out this advocacy in correctional centers, we carry it out in government government offices as well. And as at present, most of the implementing partners of, you said, like for the NGO sectors, are aiming to implement mental health program across board in the country, like in Nigeria. So I think that will also really help to spread more awareness to the people, even the people making the law. And recently I attended a program on harm reduction, which is needle and syringe program, an activity for people that inject psychoactive substance. And government leaders were there, like Minister of Health and other people. And I happened to communicate with one of them, and I asked why they don't really value psychologists or mental health in the country level. And that was when they said that the guy actually said they are working on it, they're trying to make it a public hearing. I think they have made it a public hearing already. So I think with these advocacies and things we are already doing, it will help to normalize it and make people that are mentally challenged access healthcare appropriately.
Right. Thank you so much. Udeme, you mentioned building relationships with the people who are even in charge of making sure that the law that is in force is executed, or rather they're working in line with the law that is in force. When you're building relationships with these people and are very much intentional about raising more awareness on suicide prevention, what do you think is making it so hard for the parliament to pass a law that is effective for the people that they think they are representing?
Well, I think that there is very little knowledge about what mental health, as Esther has already opined. And, even among very educated persons, there is still this ancient understanding of what mental health is. And so go to the local community, even in the urban areas, ask someone, how are you doing? Now, let me say this. I think the way our upbringing, the way we have been socialized is also a problem, because basically when you ask someone, how are you? It's supposed to be a probing question. But you know what it has become? It has become a call and response kind of. It's just a greeting. So someone tells you good morning to you, and then an older person says, how are you? And then the next thing is fine. Now, the attitude of the older person that is asking, how are you, is already very passive. So even if this person has something to communicate, the person does not have the time to, does not have the listening there. And you start to talk, and the person is wondering, why is he dragging it for too long? Is it not just how are you? Okay, so these are some of the challenges for people, the way we are socialized. I mean that a probing question as important as how are you has been commonized and simplified to a mere, it's like an exclusive preserve of an older person to ask a younger person. In the case where a younger person asks an older person, how are you doing? It looks like disrespect. You get so when it's rude for you to ask an older person how are you. Yeah, so these are some of the issues. And so if at this level of casual communication with very basic, normal, everyday person, these things are well intended, yes, but they are wrongly executed, because someone who is grieving should actually be allowed to feel his feelings, should be allowed to grieve, should be allowed to mourn, comfortably going through the process. But we try to tell them, you're overreacting now. This person died like 3 weeks ago. So we put certain timelines.
3 weeks is a very short time.
We put certain timelines to how long people should grieve. And so people mourn in the excess of what is expected, and they're like, why is he overdoing it? Is he only that was close to the person? So, these things, when we impose our own pain threshold on other people. Now, with this stark ignorance, with this lack of information, lack of awareness on what mental health is, you do not expect lawmakers who have been elected or selected, depending on the process that drew them into the legislature, to really understand why they should spend long hours deliberating on a mental health bill. I mean, what are you talking about? Because deep down, under their breath, as they are deliberating on these things, their upbringing, the environmental factors that shape them from childhood to becoming adults, becoming leaders, still tell them, somebody that has more person is mad, man. The person should go to psychiatric hospital. And then the next thing is, mostly what they would possibly do is to see how to just move on until we begin to have more purpose-driven leaders, more purpose-driven, more aware, all-round educated legislators. Then they will not even understand how legislation, how policy affects the common person. And so they won't even waste their time on something that is not going to yield any benefit to them immediately. So I feel that this ignorance and the fact that the harvest is plenty, the workload is much, but just a small percentage of people are doing the advocacy. Small percentage of people, all the 45 that we graduated from my bachelor's, but only 2 that are practicing. 2 of 48 in 1 year. Now check a longer stretch of years of people who get to study psychology and related courses, and you get to realize that people just want the bachelor's degree to move on and get a job and move on with their life. So these are some of the issues, these are some of the challenges, because if we had more hands, if we had more people advocating this, it means that it would force the National Assembly. If we had more people from every end lobbying their MPs, by the time they arrive on the floor of the parliament, with the right knowledge, they would be able to lobby others and drive for these policies to be enacted. So that's basically those are some of the things that I feel have had to deal with us. Cultural, environmental, generally, environmental factors.
Right. Very important when you point at the environmental factors, because I've had stories that I find shocking, because Nigeria, to most of the African countries or even other countries that are not on the continent, have this imagination that Nigeria is doing right. So when I have conversations with some
we are doing well. It's just not very good.
When you get to have conversations with other people and you hear about these hardships, it's very shocking, because for some reason you get to imagine that, oh yes, other African countries are struggling, but not in the way that you can't imagine Nigeria to be in that state. So when I saw this, there is basically, I would say there is no law in force to help the people that are struggling mentally. So when I saw that, and I was like, no, Nigeria can't have that. Nigeria can't be that far away from advancement in regards to health. Esther, you mentioned the bit of practitioners doing it the wrong way. That isn't as far as helping the people struggling mentally. And I saw a video that made me cringe. So I think, should I call it a psychiatric ward, where people were detained. They were on handcuffs, and even, are they called, maybe I should just call them shackles. To me, it was an image of slavery. This is how slavery is presented to us for the most part. So when I saw them in shackles and also their hands are in handcuffs, I was like, how is this happening? Esther, do you have anything to add on to that, as far as the practitioners are handling people struggling mentally?
Okay, first off, psychiatrists are medical doctors or medical nurses, psychiatric nurses. They are not really from the mental health, like the psychology unit or something. So I feel first it has to do with the misconception they already have about mental health itself. Like, they don't really have a clue, like a real understanding, because to them mental illness is associated with madness, and they feel they have to be hard on these people. They have to be inhuman for them to actually have their senses back. So this is where this is emerging from, the misconception they still have. I work with a psychiatric nurse, I think, for a period of time, and he has worked with the government's paracetamol for 35 years and retired. Then he was recruited to work as a mental health focal person. Now, majority of us working in this unit have BSc in psychology or mental health related courses, but he actually studied nursing and then specialized in psychiatric nursing. So his orientation about mental health is quite different from the psychology perspective, from the psychological background. So them as medical practitioner, they actually feel they have to be so hard on these people because they feel they are not human. At that point, they have lost touch with reality, and the only way to bring them back to reality is actually to torture them or the rest of it. And in the where I'm currently practicing, there's a psychiatric hospital close to me, and you get there, and even if you have a relative or someone close to you that really have maybe, let's say, schizophrenic disorder and lost touch with reality, and you feel the person needs to be rehabilitated, going there and seeing the way they treat human beings, you won't really dare want to keep someone close to you down there. So I think it's emerging from misconception and misunderstanding of how mental health cases should really be handled and treated. So I think if they are sensitized enough, if they are well trained and educated on the area of mental health and not just from their medical perspective, I think the whole perspective about mental health will change from their end, and these people will be treated and handled like a human being, like that they are.
Right. And
I'd like to contribute to that.
Sure.
psychiatric nurses or mental health nurses, whatever they're called, their partners, all right, they're doing a great job too. We also need to acknowledge their effort. And just like Esther made reference to someone who has worked for 35 years and retired, the person's training as at the time, between the time that person got the training and now, is such a long time, and a lot has changed. And so one of the major things that government needs to do for the people, for the workforce in the medical field, is a routine training. They must be up to speed with global best practices. Because I don't know what video you saw. I don't know if it was from a hospital or from a spiritual center, because there is spiritism. Yeah, and so that is even more gruesome. That's terribly cringeworthy. You get to see what happens there, and you weep for the people who told this fact. Now, we are very spiritual, we're very religious people. I don't know about the rest of Africa, but I know for Nigeria.
I think the rest of Africa is. The whole of they brought us religion and we just took up to that.
Yeah, so we're very religious people, and so in handling every situation, you get to speak with people, very educated people, and then they tell you that anybody who is attempting suicide, or anyone who is suicidal, or anybody who is depressed, is suffering from strikes from evil spirits, or the person is not strong. You hear all of these things. And so, if their understanding is that this is a spiritual attack, the first point of call when they see someone who has a mental health illness is to go to a church or a spiritual place. And so, you see the way these people are treated. And so, when relatives and loved ones see how these people are treated, they want to hide their own people. They try to shield so that the stigma does not get to their family. They just want to manage it in a very small way until it is full-blown issues. And then they cannot control again, and the person goes out there walking half-dressed or even naked. And so this is also a part of it. Religion has been, yes, it has its good sides. I agree, but I think that in the area of mental health, it has done us so much of harm. People try to pray depression away. They try to pray suicidal ideation away. They try to pray everything. You try to pray away. But even in the Holy Book talks about watching and praying. And so in the place of watching, it has to do with practice. It has to do with actions. It has to do with us seeking the help, because it is also God that gave man the knowledge to have these different niches: medical health, mental health, all these areas. But the Creator also gave us, gave humans the wisdom to do this. And so if, for instance, you have a headache and then you have to go to the hospital, the same way, if you feel low over a period of time and then you don't understand the way you feel, you should seek help. Those are some of the issues.
So I wanted to ask both of you, don't you think there is also an issue of the lack or absence of an effective law in place when it comes to these centers? What I saw was not a spiritual center. It was more like a medical place, and this was happening. And that's what I think really shocked me a lot, because I was seeing a lady who also has a child, and she's just like, I want to see my child. I've not seen my child. I want to go home. And you're seeing that she is actually being thrown into a darker place instead of being guided towards the light. So I felt like probably it is a problem of the lack of an effective law, that these people are just freestyling on other human beings struggling. What do you have to say on that? Esther, you can...
Okay, I'm sorry if I get the question well. You are saying that maybe the maltreatment by the practitioners against the mentally challenged might actually be because of the law that guides those. Is that the question?
Yes, it's like the absence of an effective law. Could it be the problem that is causing this?
Okay, so I think from my end, mental health is not something that the governments really pay attention to. So the funding is quite very low, like they don't really budget for mental health. And I guess it's as a result of these people not really being appreciated enough. And if you are working, you're trying to help a patient, because their budgets are allocated to medical doctors and other practitioners, but the mental health practitioners, their budget doesn't really get there. So you now see a lot of them resigning and either traveling out or working in a private firm. So because where this maltreatment, you likely see this maltreatment on mental health patients is in a government psychiatric hospitals. So I guess it's as a result of them not being appreciated enough, and they're not well paid, or attention is not given by the government. They don't just really care. So to them, I think they feel maybe, people transfer aggression. So I wouldn't really say it's the law, because even if the law allow you to maltreat another human for your conscience, you know that you're treating a human being. But for the fact that you are not even appreciated, whatever you do, nobody give a fuck about it. Sorry to use that word. Nobody really cares about nobody really cares about what you do, and they don't appreciate what you do. So I feel to them, maybe transferring the aggression on the patients, especially, when once a person is psychotic, the person is lost touch with reality, they can do anything, and it's not within their control, and that can actually send some anger to the person managing them. Thereby, you see them using like a lot of hard things on them, beating them carelessly, pushing them around, and a lot happens. So I think it's as a result of them not being appreciated enough, and there's no budget that really appreciates what they're really doing out there. Nobody comes to inspect them or maybe ask them why they're doing what they're doing. They just feel that's the best treatment for people who are not in their senses. So I think it's just them not being appreciated enough by the government.
Right. Is there something you would like to add on that, Udeme?
I think she has addressed the issue of motivation, and that's a huge problem. However, I do not make excuses for people who are paid to do a job and then they decide to do it differently. People should be able to take responsibility and do what they have to do or resign.
Right.
I understand it's frustrating sometimes, but we must own up that if we have to do this job, if we are drawing salaries from this job, we must do it as it is. I understand the pressure that comes with, facilities that are understaffed, facilities that you have way too many patients, and the manpower is quite small, and then they probably don't have a budget and resources that get to them at the end of the day. And so yes, this is a factor too. And then we had already spoken to understanding of global best practices. Some of these people, professionals, but they are still in the roots. Probably not very updated with current realities, how it is done here, or maybe they have resorted to self-help at the point that they are helpless, they have cried for long, and then nothing has been done from the authorities, and so they resort to self-help. The best way they think that they can handle the situation, and then they just go all in. And since nobody is saying, why are you doing this, they continue, and then they replicate them. Younger people coming into practice, and so the cycle continues.
Because you had already mentioned that there are also people that are joining it just to get a salary, but aren't passionate about mental health. And I got to know about this, I think, in 2020, and this was here in Uganda. I was having a conversation with a certain psychologist, and I was in the hands of a psychiatrist who maltreated me. How far back? I was 16 at the time. So when I was having a conversation with her, because I was weeping, I came to a place of awareness of what had happened. And I was like, that was reckless. How does a professional in the mental health field fail at what they are supposed to be doing? It is out to me that there are some people in the field that do not have any sort of acknowledgement of how magnitude mental health is. What is it like? Do you people get to have some sort of between the psychiatrists or psychologists, or is it far apart? The psychologists are in their region and the psychiatrists have their own kind of groups. Is it an effort of two forces to make things work in Nigeria?
Well, ideally, it's supposed to be a teamwork, and everyone should work as a team. But I do not know. I cannot categorically tell because I do not work in a government facility. So probably it predisposes me to this discrimination even more since I am in private practice. So there is a possibility that this is also happening in government practice. But you get to see psychiatrists or maybe medical doctors in the area of, those are psychiatrists or mental health nurses or psychiatric nurses think that you are quite surface with your knowledge of mental health, since they have traversed the medical aspects of it. So they feel that they're quite surface. When you guys are done with the first aid, you pass them to us. So I feel that there is this cold war between these teams, but I cannot particularly speak for the whole population. But I think I have experienced it. I mean, I've been on the same program, maybe radio program, discussing mental health And then the other guest was a mental health or a psychiatric nurse. And then she would be putting out certain jabs. This kind of vibe that gives like, I'm trying to explain this better. Just so you know, it's there. It's some kind of very cold, silent war that is happening. And I feel that this is not about everyone. It could just be about individuals and the attitude towards people generally, and not necessarily about practice.
Yeah, Esther, when we were at the start, you talked about going to spaces where you find people have no single awareness of what mental health is. How have you managed to go through the hurdles of stigma to raise awareness in these environments?
Okay, first of the mentality of people, once you talk about mental health and the need for therapy, and the first thing a person will tell you will be like, I'm fine, nothing is wrong with me, I don't have mental health. And you try to tell some people that everybody has mental health, and mental health is not synonymous to mental illness. It was a difficult task to take, but over the years I've been able to organize series of trainings and capacity building, first within the environment I'm working and the people I'm working with, and then going out. We had a way of giving them a basic mental health screening to that ask those basic questions of mental health that experience that people will likely have, and so more like making them all advocates for mental health, such that when they go out there, they don't just say they don't have mental health problem. Because imagine giving a client or placing a client on treatment, or someone on treatment, the person needs to take drug because of their mental state, maybe depression and suicidal thoughts, PTSD, or whatever mental health challenge they may have. They lost hope and they don't want to stay on the drugs, and then maybe the next time they go visiting the person, they report dead. So I had to make them understand that there are a lot of things that can actually make a person not to take their drugs, and these are all mental health challenges. So doing this, I have had a way of eradicating the stigma that the health workers themselves might actually have about mental health, and make them to talk more about it, so that when they notice that somebody has default their treatment or whatever challenges going out there, the first thing they have to check is their mental health. And then going to correctional centers too, I've also had a way of making the matrons, because of the way they really maltreat and carelessly treat the inmates, I've also made them to realize that if a person exhibits a particular malbehavior, and this should be a behavioral problem or other underlying mental health challenges, instead of them thinking the person is just stubborn. Even in correctional center where you are really hitting someone so hard and the person is still repeating a behavior, you should be concerned. So instead of you dismissing that fact and just going ahead to inflict more pain and thinking they are stubborn, you first check their mental health. So it's something that really took so much energy for me to make people to come in terms with what mental health is. But I wouldn't say I've been able to go around the country to do that yet, but at least in the small space where I'm practicing, I've been able to make people to accept mental health as it is.
What are some of the stigma phrases that you get to hear in these in these societies that you work with? What are some of the ridiculous things that you've heard?
Oh, okay. So quite funny though. So you hear people calling. Okay, for me. Okay, let me use myself first. I'm a practitioner. I'm a professional. And then when once you tell somebody you're a psychologist, they tag me psycho. So they are already calling you psycho. So you're already the problem here. And then going to the going to the community, especially clients that prove very stubborn to these people, they will be like, that person has coin, or they will be like, the person is mental, and calling the person mad, a lot of other crazy names, and taking the person dangerous, so they can't even relate with the person appropriately, and making, like, saying the person is incompetent, the person is crazy, the person is dangerous. These are some of the words that they used on people that are having those mental health challenge. I think a lot of other awful words that they use on these people, and this also places a stigma and prevents them from seeking for help. And I think not just people that are mentally challenged, like not just the client they are working with, but even themselves. So they feel seeing a psychologist is equivalent to being mentally unstable or deranged. So that's what is posing stigma in the area I'm practicing.
yes, we had in the suicide surge of Q1 2021, we were able to rescue up to 5 attempted suicide victims. 5 of them in my state. And we were not able to do that simply because we were in our houses and we were all, but because I see these things, they see their friends say certain things and they are scared about it. They see that this is like a red flag and then they call for help. And this has helped because without this, you can't stay in your house and know everyone who's trying to take their life, all right? And so I also realized that every time that we rescue someone who attempts suicide and they walk through the process of healing to rehabilitation, we have successfully armed another warrior to help us with their mental health. Because they speak to these subjects from an experiential point of view. They have been there. And so they speak to it with so much passion. And by the time they share their stories, it encourages more people to speak up. And so these are some of the silver bullets. These are some of the approaches that we have, taken up, which has helped. The awareness is spreading. Matter of fact, 2 days ago, someone made a post, raised a red flag, and actually said actually was going to die, attempt suicide. And I was busy at work. Was someone who is not close to me mentioned me on Facebook, Udeme Okono, we need to help this person. And I said, and the moment I saw it, I reached out to the person. Do you know this person personally? Yes. And so I said, head over to the person's house already. And so, imagine that these persons were not aware of this thing. The cruise was too much back then. You'd say, I feel depressed. And you were like, if you want to die, die now. What's wrong? Why are you announcing it?
Oh my God.
Media tell you person when serious one die, you die. They announce. And that's pidgin way of saying somebody that wants to die will just go ahead and die. They don't announce it. And so, and this continues to drive people to the edge. People who put out this red flag do not sincerely want to die. They are tired of bottling it all up. They are looking for help. It is at the point that they cannot find help. That is when they do their thinking. And so when we have, I tell my people that every minute counts, every second counts when you see a red flag. And so I feel that with the efforts that we have made and other stakeholders have made, the stereotype stigma is reducing because it is now fashionable to talk about mental health. You see people on social media, either these days, like, you feel, I'm not so proud of my mental health. I mean, I look like it's fashionable that we're talking about it. It wasn't like this, but the efforts of practitioners, stakeholders all around have been really helpful, bringing us to this point.
Thank you so much. But Udeme, you have some of the ridiculous things. As a man, what are those things that men in your corners are talking about?
Yeah, well, about phrases, stigmas, and all. Well, one of the major concerns that we have in practice is the fact that, down here, attempted suicide is still considered a crime. And I think that this is an age-long policy which we are still campaigning to see how it can be repealed and a proper replacement given. And, this way, it also goes to align with cultural practices. Down there in communities, anyone who is complaining of depression or who has consistent low mood for a period of time, or someone who is suicidal is generally considered someone who is maybe struck by evil spirit and all of those. And, as we have already had already referenced earlier, it's difficult for you to get them to see it differently. They just consider this is a spiritual attack and it has to be handled, in that way. Again, there is a problem of socialization, particularly for the male child. Generally, the male child is not expected to cry. The male child is socialized not to ask for help. The male child grows up feeling like he should always be in charge of his emotions. He should always man up. He should always show strength. And so this way it affects the man. He begins to suppress emotions. And so this is one of such things. The man is not expected to cry. He's supposed to be in charge. That's why you would see in a family where, a girl child of maybe 5 to 7 years old has a younger brother of maybe 4 who's, apparently the younger one, but when they're about to leave for school, you would hear parents say, take care of your sister, protect her, make sure that nothing happens to her. And, this has been the practice. So the male child grows up with so much of responsibilities and expectations. So yes, these are some of the issues about our practice. You would also, the moment you introduce yourself, like, oh, psycho people. It is generally assumed that, if you talk about mental health or someone who is having mental health concerns in the community, people will begin to look down on you. It would bring a bad name to the family, and so families continue to shield people who, if they had asked for help or sourced for ways of getting help for their loved one, they would have been able to salvage a situation or two.
It's very powerful what you guys are doing in Nigeria. What is the message that you would love to leave behind for the listener on the continent? Because now I'm coming down from here in Uganda, and you guys are right up there in Nigeria. Esther, what message would you love to leave for the listener?
Okay, I would love to say that mental health is a very important part of health, and people should learn to prioritize it. They should not stigmatize people that are mentally challenged, because it stops them from seeking for available help when they need it. So people should really, really take care of their mental health.
Thank you so much, Esther. Udeme, what message would you love someone to walk away with after this episode?
I'll share a few thoughts on issues. One is the fact that it is okay to feel your feelings, and it is okay for the male child to cry. It's funny, some of the men who are going to listen to this, you who is listening to this, that is a man, you may actually think that this is just ridiculous. But no. Research shows that crying is therapeutic. Talking is also very much therapeutic. And so when you are overwhelmed, when it feels like you don't have an understanding, when you have the urge, if you're worried about what the society would say, you can actually just lock yourself inside and let it all out. Now, picture a child, who maybe was, flogged by the parents or was cautioned, and then he gets to cry himself to sleep. Now, if you watch that child waking up, and then the child wants to get up from bed or something, you'd see that the child would stagger. What does this show? It means that it feels like a burden has been taken off this child. And so that's exactly how crying works. It is therapeutic. And again, talking is therapeutic too. Now, talking about talking, one of the quotes that guides my practice is the fact that shame dies when we own up our pain and tell our stories in safe places. The shame dies when we own up our pain and tell our stories in safe places. We must learn to speak about how we feel. We must also, as friends, as colleagues, as family members, create safe spaces for people to be able to talk to us. What does a safe space look like? A safe space is a place where someone knows that his or her secrets are safe here, that this place is going to be devoid of judgment, that this thing that he or she is sharing with you is not going to be a trending news item. And so for the rest of us, we must build relationships that will provide safe spaces for us to discuss how we feel at different times. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sparing time to be on the podcast. And I hope that your efforts in Nigeria build or create more fruits on the part of the citizens in Nigeria and wherever you get to go. Thank you so much for being present with me and the listener that has been on board with us. Have a great, is it afternoon that time? It's not yet afternoon. We've entered afternoon in Uganda. It's midday right now. We've entered afternoon. Thank you so much. I'm glad we made it with a different time zone.
I couldn't come up with a takeaway from this episode because Esther and Udeme came with so much knowledge that I want to carry on for the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to keep referring to this to check myself, assess myself. What views am I carrying around mental health? How best can I communicate with my neighbor? And for anyone that is struggling mentally, how best can I approach them? And who do I connect them to? If you know anyone, specifically, this is for the Nigerians right now. If you have anyone that you know that is struggling, please reach out to these two, Esther Timothy and Udeme Okono. Their social media handles have those names, and you would not fail to find help. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Hashtag with Nabuguzi Kiwanuka. If you love what you heard, make sure you subscribe to Hashtag with Nabuguzi Kiwanuka in your podcast platform of choice and share it with your friends, loved ones, and every other person that you believe is affected by the millennial world around us. Also, feel free to share your insights about what connected with you in this episode, and be sure to tag us. We are at Hashtag with Nabuguzi Kiwanuka on Facebook, and on Twitter our handle is at HTNK Podcast. For anyone that needs to reach out to me for reviews or connection to any mental health professional, do not hesitate to reach out to my email, nabuguzi@nabuguzikiwanuka.com. Let us meet on Sunday in Nabu's Journal and find out what is going to happen. What happened to me this week. Let's review the week together on Sunday, and I really appreciate your time. And until then, and until the next month, I wish you the best in your life, and make sure that you make mental health a priority for yourself and for your neighbor. Goodbye.